I arrived at my parents' mansion in a wheelchair, broken and desperate, begging for shelter. They slammed the door in my face as if I were nothing more than a stranger. The next morning, I discovered my grandfather's forgotten card. When I presented it at the bank, the manager's chair toppled backward in shock. "Sir," he stammered, "you need to see this immediately." That night remains etched in my memory with crystalline clarity, as vivid as if it happened yesterday rather than months ago. My name is Winston Cole. I was 34 years old when my world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Before the accident, I held a prestigious position as project director for one of Texas's leading technology corporations, commanding respect and a generous salary that afforded my family a comfortable suburban life in Austin. My existence seemed idyllic, almost too perfect to be real. I had everything a man could want: professional success, financial security, and most precious of all, a loving family. Elise, my wife of 9 years, possessed a gentleness that could dissolve the stress of even the most grueling workday with nothing more than her radiant smile. She had a way of making our house feel like home, filling it with warmth, laughter, and the delicious aroma of home-cooked meals. And then there was Mia, our 5-year-old daughter, the absolute light of our lives. With her cascade of curly hair and enormous round eyes that sparkled with innocence and mischief, she had the power to make my heart swell with love every time she wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and whispered, "Daddy, I love you so much." That particular day had been gloriously ordinary, filled with the simple joys that make life worth living. We spent a delightful afternoon at the shopping mall, where Mia had pleaded relentlessly for a new doll, her eyes wide with hope and determination. Elise laughed at our daughter's persistence while trying on clothes in various stores, twirling in front of mirrors and asking for my opinion with that playful smile I adored. We indulged in ice cream cones that dripped sweetly down our fingers, watched an animated movie that had Mia squealing with delight, and filled the car ride with conversation and laughter that seemed to make time stand still. The rain began as we loaded our purchases into the car, a gentle pattering that quickly intensified into a torrential downpour. Raindrops hammered against the windshield with increasing fury, but I dismissed any concern. I had driven these roads countless times, in all weather conditions. "Drive carefully, honey," Elise said softly from the passenger seat, her voice carrying that gentle concern that always made me feel loved and protected. Her slender fingers stroked Mia's curly hair as our daughter dozed peacefully in her car seat, exhausted from our adventure, clutching her new doll even in sleep. I reached over and squeezed Elise's hand, feeling the familiar warmth of her skin against mine, then returned my full attention to the rain-slicked highway. The road stretched before us, moderately busy with evening traffic. Driving had always been one of my simple pleasures, that sense of freedom and control behind the wheel, the feeling that I could navigate any challenge the road presented. The rain treacherous, shimmering sheet of water that reflected the taillights of cars ahead like scattered rubies. I increased the wiper speed to maximum, their frantic rhythm creating a hypnotic swoosh, swoosh that nearly drowned out the soft pop music playing from the radio. In the back seat, Mia stirred slightly, murmuring something unintelligible about her new doll, a contented smile on her sleeping face. Elise turned toward me, her eyes glowing with happiness in the dashboard lights. "Today was absolutely wonderful, wasn't it? We should do this again tomorrow. Maybe visit that new park Mia's been talking about." I nodded, warmth flooding through my chest at the prospect of more family time, more moments like these that I knew even then were precious beyond measure. "Absolutely. I'll make sure to finish work early." Then, in one horrific instant that seemed to unfold both in slow motion and at lightning speed, everything changed forever. From the opposite direction, a massive truck emerged from the curtain of rain like a metallic monster, its blinding headlights cutting through the gray downpour like searchlights. The lights were impossibly bright, searing into my retinas and momentarily robbing me of vision. I squinted reflexively, trying to hug the right shoulder of the road, but those piercing beams seemed to follow me, aimed directly at my face. I raised my hand instinctively to shield my eyes, muttering a curse under my breath. The steering wheel jerked violently in my momentarily loosened grip. Our tires, already struggling for purchase on the water-slicked surface, lost their tenuous grip entirely. The car began to hydroplane, the wheels spinning uselessly as we transformed from a controlled vehicle into a spinning carnival ride of terror. I slammed my foot onto the brake pedal with all my strength, but physics had already taken control. The car spun wildly, whirling like a top gone mad, the world outside the windows becoming a dizzying blur of lights, rain, and darkness. Elise screamed my name, her voice raw with terror. "Winston!" Mia's frightened wails pierced through from the back seat, her innocent world suddenly filled with inexplicable horror. My heart hammered against my ribcage so violently I thought it might burst through my chest. Everything became surreal, disconnected, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's nightmare. The screech of metal grinding against concrete filled my ears. Glass shattered in explosive bursts. The car impacted the concrete median barrier with devastating force, the collision sending us airborne for a moment that stretched into eternity before we began to flip, rolling over and over through the torrential rain. My body was thrown forward with tremendous violence, restrained only by the seatbelt that suddenly felt like a blade cutting into my chest, trying to crush my ribcage. Pain exploded through my body, concentrated in my back and spine, as though someone had driven a serrated knife directly into my vertebrae and was twisting it with cruel deliberation. The acrid stench of gasoline mixed with the metallic tang of blood filled my nostrils, making me gag. The car finally came to rest upside down, suspended in a moment of terrible silence broken only by the relentless pounding of rain. Water poured in through the spider-webbed windows, cold and unforgiving. I hung inverted from the driver's seat, held by the seatbelt, my head spinning from the impact, ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that blocked out almost everything else. "Elise? Mia?" I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. My hands fumbled desperately with the seatbelt buckle, but they were shaking so violently I could barely grasp it. Blood from a gash on my forehead dripped into my eyes, blinding me with a red haze. I had to get out. I had to save them. This single thought consumed my entire being. With what little strength remained in my traumatized body, I managed to release the seatbelt, immediately crashing downward onto my shoulders and head against the inverted roof of the car. My body felt impossibly heavy, as though I were made of lead rather than flesh and bone. I tried to move my legs to push myself out. Nothing happened. Oh God, I can't move my legs. Realization hit me like a second collision. My legs felt completely numb, disconnected from my body, as if they belonged to someone else entirely. Using only my arms, I dragged my dead weight across a carpet of broken glass that cut into my skin, adding new pain to the overwhelming agony radiating from my spine. Cold rain lashed my face through the broken windshield. The smell of gasoline grew stronger, more oppressive, and I was suddenly terrified the car would explode at any moment, engulfing us all in flames. Propping myself on my elbows, I pulled my useless body inch by agonizing inch toward the passenger side. My heart nearly stopped when I saw Elise. She lay completely motionless, her head lolling to one side at an unnatural angle. Blood trickled from her ear and the corner of her mouth, stark crimson against her pale skin. Her beautiful face, which had been glowing with happiness just moments ago, was now ghostly white. Her eyes were half closed, vacant, staring at nothing. "Elise, wake up, baby, it's me." I shook her shoulder desperately, but her body remained limp, unresponsive, like a rag doll. My heart constricted with such force I couldn't breathe. Terror rose through me like a tidal wave, threatening to drown me from the inside. Then I forced myself to look into the back seat, and my entire world ended. Mia, my tiny little girl, was still strapped in her car seat, but blood pooled on the inverted roof beneath her, seeping from the shattered window. She wasn't crying. She wasn't moving. Her small body hung limply from the straps that had been meant to protect her. "Mia, sweetheart, wake up. Don't scare Daddy," I screamed, my voice breaking into a sob as I crawled closer, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch her small, perfect face. Her body was soft and cold. There was no breath, no pulse, no spark of life. The shock hit me like a physical blow to the chest, driving all air from my lungs. That image burned itself into my mind with permanent, searing clarity. Blood mixing with rain, my daughter's lifeless body, the sound of water drowning out everything else in the world. I held Mia close, my tears mingling with the rain that poured into the destroyed car. But my vision began to fade, darkness creeping in from the edges. The pain spreading through my entire body became unbearable, my spine feeling as though it had been crushed into dust. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, but for me, it was already far too late. The world went black, and I collapsed beside them, my last conscious thought a desperate prayer that this was just a nightmare, that I would wake up and find them alive and whole. When consciousness finally returned, everything was white, blinding, sterile white. The ICU with its sharp antiseptic smell that burned my nostrils, the steady electronic beeping of machines monitoring my vital signs, creating a rhythm that would haunt my memory. My entire body was wrapped in bandages like a mummy, layers upon layers of gauze covering injuries I couldn't yet comprehend. I tried to move, to shift my position even slightly, but stabbing pain shot from my spine like lightning, making me groan involuntarily. "Oh God, Winston, you're awake!" A joyful voice came from beside my bed, filled with relief and barely suppressed tears. I turned my head slowly, my blurry vision gradually clearing. It was Tiffany Hart, Elise's 28-year-old younger sister, sitting in a chair pulled close to my bedside. Her face showed exhaustion etched into every line. Her eyes were swollen and red from crying, but she forced a smile that didn't reach those devastated eyes, trying to hide the grief that was clearly consuming her. Tiffany had always been the cheerful, vibrant younger sister who loved visiting our home to play with Mia, bringing energy and laughter wherever she went. Seeing her here, in this clinical nightmare, sent alarm bells ringing through my confused mind. "Tiffany, what happened? Where are Elise and Mia?" I asked weakly, my voice barely more than a rasp, my throat raw and dry. She took my hand and squeezed it gently, her grip trembling. "Just calm down, okay? Please don't try to move or exert yourself. Let me call the doctor right away. I'll be right back. Just wait a moment." The way she avoided my question sent ice through my veins. A few minutes later that felt like hours, the doctor entered. He was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a grave expression that immediately told me I wasn't going to like what he had to say. He checked my eyes with a penlight, took my pulse with professional efficiency, then nodded slowly. "You're fully conscious again. That's a very good sign. It means your brain is functioning stably after the accident, despite the trauma you sustained." I looked directly at him, my heart filling with overwhelming dread. "Doctor, please tell me what's wrong with me. Why can't I feel my legs? It's like they've completely disappeared, like they're not even part of my body anymore." He sighed heavily, the sound of someone who had delivered terrible news many times before and never gotten used to it. "You suffered a severe spinal cord injury in the crash, Mr. Cole. You're paralyzed from the waist down. The damage to your spine was extensive. The chances of you walking again are, realistically, virtually zero. We'll do everything we can for rehabilitation, but I need you to understand that it will be extremely difficult, and recovery to your previous mobility is unlikely." His words struck me like lightning, each syllable a physical blow. Paralyzed. Me, a strong, healthy man who had played basketball every weekend, who had carried Mia on my shoulders through parks, who had danced with Elise in our kitchen, now crippled, unable to walk. I was stunned, my mind spinning, unable to fully process what he was telling me. But then, like a dam breaking, the images of Elise and Mia flooded back with crushing force. "Elise and Mia, where are they? Are they okay? Please tell me they're okay," I asked in panic, my voice rising to a near shout, trembling with desperation and fear. The doctor glanced at Tiffany, then deliberately avoided my eyes, focusing on his clipboard instead. Tiffany lowered her head in silence, unable to meet my gaze. That silence weighed on me like lead, pressing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. My heart raced, pounding so hard I thought it might explode. A terrible premonition crashed over me like a wave of ice water. I gathered all my strength and shouted, desperation making my voice crack. "Somebody tell me! Where are they? Why won't anyone answer me?" I tried to push myself up, but my body betrayed me completely. My lifeless legs caused me to collapse back onto the bed, pain surging through every nerve. Physical pain, however, was absolutely nothing compared to the fear and dread crushing my heart. It's all my fault. I wasn't careful enough while driving. Oh God, what have I done? I blamed myself, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably, hot and bitter. Tiffany and a nurse rushed to hold me down, trying to keep me from injuring myself further. Tiffany whispered urgently, her own voice breaking. "Please, calm down, Winston. You'll hurt yourself even more. Please." Eventually, I lay still, breathing heavily, each breath painful, staring at the ceiling tiles as though they might provide answers. Tiffany held my hand tightly, her own hands trembling, her eyes brimming with tears that spilled over and ran down her cheeks. "Winston, you have to be strong, okay? I don't know how to say this gently, and I'm so sorry." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "But Elise and Mia, your wife and your daughter, they didn't survive the accident. They died at the scene before the ambulances could even reach the hospital. I'm so, so sorry." Her words cut into my heart like a knife, each one tearing through me. "No, it couldn't be true. What? No, that's not true. They were just injured. They had to be just injured." I shook my head violently, denying reality, but deep down in the part of my mind that remained rational, I knew it was real. The memory of blood spreading across the rainy road that night came rushing back in vivid, horrifying detail, and I completely broke down. I cried like a child, no longer caring about dignity or pride, utter despair swallowing me whole. My wife, my daughter, they were gone forever, ripped from existence in one terrible moment. And I, the survivor, was now nothing more than a broken shell, a paralyzed man left behind to somehow continue existing in a world that no longer made sense. My life, as I had known it, ended that night on that rain-slicked highway. Everything that mattered had been destroyed in seconds. The morning after learning of Elise and Mia's deaths, I barely slept at all. Sleep, when it came, brought nightmares more vivid and terrible than memory. Dreams where I reached for them, but they dissolved like smoke. Dreams where I heard Mia calling, "Daddy," but couldn't find her, no matter how I searched. I lay in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling with its network of tiny cracks that looked like spider webs, my mind spinning endlessly through horrific images, while the pungent smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils and the steady beep, beep of the heart monitor provided a relentless soundtrack to my grief. Everything around me served as a cruel reminder that I was still alive, a reminder I desperately didn't want. The starched sheets, the IV drip in my arm, the catheter I tried not to think about, the nurses who came and went with practiced sympathy, all of it screamed that I had survived when my family had not. My spirit felt shattered, like an old machine on the verge of breaking down completely, held together by nothing more than medical equipment and obligation. At least I had achieved a kind of calm, though it was the hollow calm of complete emotional exhaustion. No more screaming that tore my throat raw, no more desperate questions that no one could answer, only a dull, constant ache that spread from my heart throughout my entire body, settling into my bones like a chronic disease I would carry forever. Tiffany remained by my side through everything, an angel in human form. Her face showed exhaustion in every line, dark circles under her eyes so deep they looked like bruises, yet she still forced herself to smile whenever she caught me looking at her, pushing a food tray closer to my bed with gentle hands. "Eat some porridge, Winston. The nurse said you have to take your medicine on time, and you can't do that on an empty stomach." She whispered softly, as if afraid of startling me, treating me like something fragile and breakable, which I suppose I was. I looked at her, feeling both profound gratitude and crushing guilt. This young woman, who should have been living her own life, going on dates, building her career, spending time with friends, instead sat vigil beside her broken brother-in-law. I nodded weakly and tried to swallow spoonfuls of the bland, watery porridge, but my throat felt blocked, like something was stuck there, making each swallow an effort of will. Tiffany, tell me what happened. Everything from the moment of the accident until I woke up. How long was I unconscious? And how did you know to come here that very night? My voice came out hoarse and weak. I tried to sit up a little, hoping a change in position would ease the constant pain, but the sharp agony in my back made me wince and abandon the attempt. Tiffany paused, setting the spoon down with a soft click, and moved closer to sit on the edge of my bed. She sighed deeply, a sound that seemed to come from her soul, her eyes drifting toward the window where early morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, painting the room in shades of gold that felt obscenely cheerful given the circumstances. You were in a coma for 2 days, Winston. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. The hospital found the emergency contact information in Elise's medical records. They called me. I was the only emergency contact she had listed. Did you know that? I was at home, getting ready for bed, actually, when the phone rang. She paused, her hands clutching at the edge of the bedsheet, knuckles white with tension. They told me there had been a terrible accident, that Elise, Mia, and you were all in critical condition. I'll never forget that phone call for as long as I live. Her voice trembled, threatening to break. I could picture it clearly. Tiffany alone in her small apartment, the darkness broken only by the glow of her phone screen, a stranger's voice delivering news that would change everything. I rushed over immediately, driving through that awful rain, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst right out of my chest. I kept praying the whole way, making bargains with God, promising anything if you would all just be okay. Tears began streaming down her cheeks, though her voice remained relatively steady. When I got here, I stood frozen in the hospital hallway when the doctor told me. She had to stop, swallowing hard before continuing. Elise and Mia had died at the scene. There was nothing they could do, no heroic interventions possible. They were gone before the ambulance even arrived. I had to sign papers, identify the bodies, handle all the formalities, all by myself, while you lay unconscious down the hall. She lowered her head, tears rolling freely down her face and dropping onto the white sheets. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, walking into that cold room and seeing them both covered with sheets. Mia looked so small, Winston, so small and peaceful, like she was just sleeping. I listened, my heart twisting with pain that was somehow worse than any physical agony. Tiffany had endured all of that alone, while I lay unconscious, blissfully unaware. She had been forced to face horrors no one should have to face, especially not alone. Thank you, Tiffany, truly. I don't know what to say. My voice cracked with emotion. You handled everything alone, and now I'm asking even more of you. Please, can you organize the funeral for Elise and Mia? I know it's too much, but I can't do it from this bed. I had to pause to collect myself, fighting back tears. Elise once told me, years ago when we were just talking about hypotheticals, the way young couples do, that she wanted to be buried in the cemetery near our house, the one with the cherry trees. She thought it was beautiful there. And Mia, she loved white flowers, white roses especially. She said they looked like snow. My voice broke completely, and I had to stop talking, pressing my hand over my eyes as tears leaked through my fingers. Tiffany nodded, wiping her own eyes with the back of her hand. I'll take care of everything, Winston. Don't worry. You just focus on recovering, please. And please, please stop blaming yourself. No one wanted this accident to happen. It wasn't your fault. I said nothing in response because I couldn't. The guilt was too heavy, too consuming. I could only look down at my motionless legs under the white hospital blanket. I couldn't feel them at all, as if they had been amputated even though they were still physically attached. The thought of being disabled for the rest of my life, dependent on others for the most basic functions, made me feel like I was being strangled. God, how am I supposed to live now? Paralyzed from the waist down, unable to walk, unable to work. I'm worthless, a burden to everyone who comes near me. I whispered, my hands clenching the sheets until my knuckles turned white, nails digging into my palms. Tiffany took my hand firmly. Don't think like that. Don't you dare think like that. You will recover, at least partially. As long as you're alive, there's still hope. You have to stay positive for Elise and Mia, if not for yourself. But her well-meaning words only made me feel more hopeless, highlighting the vast chasm between her optimism and my reality. The future ahead was nothing but pitch-black darkness with no visible way out, no light at the end of the tunnel people always talked about. In desperation, needing to hear familiar voices, even if they were cold ones, I called my parents. Camden and Marilyn Cole lived in a luxurious villa in one of Austin's most exclusive neighborhoods, always busy with their real estate empire, constantly flying to meetings, making deals, expanding their holdings. Our relationship had never been close or warm. They had always viewed me as a disappointing project because I chose to pursue technology and project management instead of joining the family real estate business, seeing my choice as a personal rejection of everything they valued. But now, in my darkest hour, I needed them. Surely tragedy would bring us together. Surely they would help. My hands shook as I dialed my father's number, each ring feeling like an eternity. "Hello?" My father's voice came through, cold and businesslike as always, as if he were answering a call from a potential client rather than his son. "Dad, it's me, Winston." I tried to keep my voice steady, professional, knowing that emotional displays made him uncomfortable. "Yes, what is it?" No warmth, no curiosity, just impatience. I told him everything in as few words as possible, knowing he hated long explanations. The accident, the deaths of Elise and Mia, my paralysis, my complete inability to handle basic logistics from a hospital bed. "I need you and Mom to help Tiffany with the funeral arrangements. I can't do anything from here, and it's too much for her to handle alone." Silence stretched on the other end of the line for a long moment. Then he muttered, his tone suggesting I was interrupting something important. "All right, I'm in a meeting right now. I'll look into it later." He hung up without another word. Not one question about the severity of my injuries. Not a single word of condolence for Elise and Mia, his daughter-in-law and granddaughter. Not even a hint of comfort or reassurance that he would actually help. Just, "I'll look into it later," as if I had asked him to review a minor business contract. I stared at the darkened phone screen, which reflected my pale, haggard face back at me. The coldness of his response burned bitterly inside my chest, but I told myself that perhaps my mother would be different. Mothers were supposed to be warm, nurturing, understanding. I called her number with trembling fingers, hope flickering weakly in my devastated heart. "Yes?" Her voice was clipped, distracted. "Mom, it's Winston. I need to talk to you about something important." "I'm very busy right now, Winston. Can this wait?" "No, it can't wait. Mom, there was an accident. Elise and Mia are dead. I'm paralyzed. I need help with—" "I'm very busy too," she interrupted, her tone suggesting I was being unreasonable by bothering her with this. "Handle it yourself. You're an adult." She ended the call abruptly, as if my call was nothing more than an annoying interruption to her day, no more significant than a telemarketer or wrong number. I stared at the dark phone screen reflecting my pale, shocked face. Their indifference felt like a physical assault, burning in my chest like acid. They were my parents, the people who had brought me into this world. How could they be so utterly heartless? How could they hear that their granddaughter was dead and respond with irritation at being bothered? But I no longer had the strength to argue, to demand the love and support I deserved, or to even feel the full weight of my anger. My last bit of emotional energy had been completely drained. Only the dull, constant pain remained, a companion that would apparently never leave me. That same afternoon, as golden sunlight streamed through the hospital window in cheerful mockery of my situation, my phone rang again. This time it was from the company where I had dedicated 8 years of my life. I had been a project director, leading teams through complex, high-stakes contracts, sacrificing countless sleepless nights, weekends, holidays, always putting the company first. They must be calling to check on me, I thought, a tiny spark of hope flickering to life in my chest. Surely my years of loyalty and hard work counted for something. My boss's voice was ice cold, devoid of any sympathy or warmth. "Winston, we're calling to inform you that because of your prolonged absence, a critical project has been severely impacted. Management has decided to transfer your responsibilities to someone else, effective immediately." My heart sank like a stone dropped in deep water. What? I was in an accident. I was unconscious for just 2 days. Surely you can't. He cut me off without hesitation, his voice remaining professionally detached. "It's not just the 2 days, Winston. Your extended, unnotified leave has caused significant damage to ongoing projects and client relationships. We have no choice but to terminate your employment to maintain organizational progress and protect our reputation." Terminate. The word hit me like a thunderbolt. "How can you do this? I'm paralyzed. I lost my wife and daughter. Please, just give me time to recover, to figure out what's next. I've given this company 8 years of my life." I tried to explain, my voice shaking as I told him about the accident, about my pain, about everything I had lost. But he refused to listen further, speaking over my desperate pleas. "The decision is final, Winston. We wish you the best of luck in your recovery. Someone from HR will contact you about final paperwork and your last paycheck." The call ended in those few, short, brutal sentences, leaving only the long, empty beep of a disconnected line. When the screen went dark, I felt a profound emptiness, like a black hole had opened up inside my chest, swallowing everything: hope, dignity, purpose, future. Family gone, career gone, my body no longer truly my own, and the future ahead? Nothing but an endless abyss stretching in every direction. I lay there staring out the window as the afternoon light slowly faded into evening, my heart dying little by little with each passing moment. I had lost everything that defined me as a person. I was no longer a husband, no longer a father, no longer a professional. I was just a broken man in a hospital bed with no clear reason to continue. When Tiffany came back that evening, she immediately saw something was wrong from my face. "What happened? Winston, what's wrong?" I told her, tears streaming down my face, unable to hold back the flood of emotion. "They fired me, Tiffany. I've lost absolutely everything. There's nothing left." She hugged me tightly, her arms strong and warm around my shaking shoulders. "You still have me, Winston. We'll get through this together, I promise." But at that moment, I couldn't believe her words, couldn't see how anything could possibly get better. My life, which had once been at its peak, successful career, beautiful family, bright future, had now fallen into the deepest pit imaginable. Everything had collapsed, too fast, too cruelly, like a building demolished in seconds. I wondered, staring at the ceiling as Tiffany held me, could anything possibly be worse than this? Or was this only the beginning of a much longer descent into hell? The following days passed in a haze of medication and pain, each one blending into the next until I lost track of time entirely. I lay motionless in that hospital bed, my body wrapped in bandages, my paralyzed legs serving as a brutal, constant reminder of everything I had lost. The medications they gave me dulled the physical pain somewhat, but nothing could touch the agony in my heart. Elise and Mia's funeral took place without me. A husband and father who couldn't even stand to give them a final farewell, who couldn't be there for the most important goodbye of his life. The thought tormented me constantly. I should have been there. I should have been the one carrying Elise's coffin, the one placing flowers on Mia's tiny casket, the one thanking people for coming and accepting their condolences with dignity. Instead, I lay in a hospital bed, useless and broken. Tiffany handled everything, just as she had promised. She was magnificent in her strength, though it cost her dearly. I could only picture the scene based on what she told me later. A small white coffin for Mia, barely larger than a toy box, surrounded by white roses. Cherry blossoms for Elise, just as she had wanted, their delicate pink petals drifting in the breeze. Friends and colleagues bowing their heads in respectful silence, speaking in hushed tones about what a tragedy it was, how young they both were, how unfair life could be. But I wasn't there. I could only lie in my hospital bed, tears soaking the pillow, hour after hour, blaming myself for being the one who survived when they were so much better, so much more deserving of life. 3 days after the accident, or rather, 3 days after my entire world collapsed into rubble, Tiffany returned to the hospital. When she pushed open the door to my room, her face was pale, almost gray with exhaustion. The dark circles under her eyes had deepened dramatically, so pronounced it looked as though she hadn't slept properly since that fateful night, which she probably hadn't. Yet she still tried to maintain her composure, forcing a smile that trembled at the edges, determined not to burden me further with her own grief and exhaustion. "Have you eaten anything today?" "I brought some fresh fruit," she said, setting a cloth bag on the small table beside my bed, her voice trying unsuccessfully to sound cheerful and normal. I looked at her, overwhelmed with gratitude mixed with guilt so heavy it felt like it might crush me. Tiffany stood there with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing an old coat that had seen better days, looking like a weary warrior returning from battle. At only 28 years old, she should have been enjoying a free and carefree life, going to parties, dating, building her own future, not running around taking care of a broken brother-in-law who could offer nothing in return. "Thank you, Tiffany. You've handled everything so well. How was the funeral? Did everything go smoothly?" I asked hoarsely, trying to sit up a little to show respect for the conversation, but the stabbing pain in my back made me grimace and abandon the attempt. She sat down in the chair beside my bed, gently smoothing the edge of the blanket with automatic, caring gestures. "Everything went as well as could be expected. I chose the cemetery near your house, just like Elise wanted. Some of Elise's friends came, and quite a few of your colleagues stopped by too. They all send their regards and asked me to tell you they're thinking of you." I nodded, but the question that had been burning in my mind rose to my lips. "What about my parents? Did they come? I told them everything. I even asked them specifically to help you." A faint hope flickered in my heart, despite everything. No matter how cold they had always been, this was their daughter-in-law and granddaughter's funeral. Surely they would show up for something this important. Surely some basic human decency would prevail. Tiffany shook her head slowly, her eyes fixed on the floor, carefully avoiding mine. "I didn't see them there, Winston. Not at all. Not once during the entire service. I waited, watching the entrance, thinking maybe they were just delayed on the road or had trouble finding the cemetery. But no one ever came who identified themselves as relatives from the husband's side." Her words hit me like a physical punch to the chest, driving the air from my lungs. I froze, my ears ringing, unable to believe what I was hearing, even though I should have expected exactly this. "That can't be. That's impossible," I whispered, my heart racing, palms suddenly sweaty. "I called them both. I told them everything. They knew about the funeral. They knew Tiffany was handling it alone and needed help." Of my parents flashed through my mind like a cruel slideshow. Camden in his expensive tailored suits, always checking his watch impatiently. Marilyn with her perfectly applied makeup and fake socialite smile, always worried about appearances and what people would think. They had always cared obsessively about their image, about maintaining their reputation in Austin's social circles. How could they possibly skip their own granddaughter's funeral? The optics alone would be terrible if anyone found out. The pain surged through me, burning like fire in my chest. I couldn't stay still, couldn't accept this. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone from the bedside table and dialed my mother's number, my fingers shaking so badly I nearly hit the wrong buttons. It rang for what felt like an eternity before her cold, irritated voice finally answered. "What is it?" "Mom, it's Winston. About Elise and Mia's funeral. Why didn't you and Dad come? I specifically asked you to help. This was your granddaughter's funeral." My voice shook as I fought to control my anger and hurt, trying to make her understand the enormity of what she had done. Silence stretched on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear her calculating what to say, how to justify the unjustifiable. Then she replied with stunning indifference, as if we were discussing something as trivial as a missed lunch appointment. "Yes, I know about it, but we were very busy. We had meetings all day that couldn't be rescheduled. There's no changing what's already happened, dear. They're already gone. Besides, I'm in another meeting right now. Goodbye." I hung up quickly, as if my call was nothing more than an annoying interruption, a spam call. I stared at the darkened phone screen, my throat tightening until I could barely breathe. Tears spilled over uncontrollably, hot and bitter, running down my cheeks and soaking into the hospital pillow. How could they? How can they be so heartless? They didn't even make an excuse, didn't even pretend to care. I whispered, my hands clenching until they hurt, nails digging into my palms hard enough to leave marks. Tiffany put her arms around my shoulders, trying to comfort me. "Calm down, Winston, please. Don't think about it too much. You'll make yourself worse, and you need to focus on healing." But the suppressed pain and rage choked me, making it hard to draw breath. I felt as if I had been cast out by my own flesh and blood, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They had given birth to me, raised me, and yet now, when I needed them most desperately, they had turned away without a second thought, without even the decency to lie convincingly about why. I felt like an orphan, completely lost and alone in the vast, indifferent world, despite technically still having living parents. In the days that followed, the hospital became my own personal hell, a prison of white walls and mechanical beeping and endless empty hours. Every morning when I woke up, I would stare at my lifeless legs under the thin blanket and try with every ounce of willpower I possessed to wiggle even just a single toe. Nothing. Not even the faintest twitch or sensation. The doctors came regularly, performing their checks with professional detachment, checking my eyes with bright lights, taking my pulse, asking me questions about pain levels and sensations. They would inject medications, adjust dosages, make notes on their tablets, but their words were always maddeningly vague and non-committal. "It takes time, Mr. Cole. You have to be patient. Every spinal injury is different. We'll continue monitoring your progress." Patient? How could I be patient when mental anguish tormented me every single second of every day, when each moment felt like drowning slowly in despair? Through it all, Tiffany stayed by my side like a tireless angel, a constant presence in the chaos. She arrived early each morning before heading to her own job, helping me eat breakfast when my hands shook too much, cutting food into small, manageable pieces, feeding me spoonful by spoonful when necessary, with infinite patience. She checked my medications according to the nurse's detailed instructions, keeping careful track of what I needed to take when, reminding me gently when it was time for the next dose. In the afternoon, she would return after work and stay for checkups, wheeling me to various appointments and tests, X-rays, EMG tests, consultations with specialists, always there, always supportive, always encouraging. But I kept trying to push her away, hating myself for being such a burden, for ruining her life along with my own. "Go home, Tiffany, please. I can manage on my own. You have your own job, your own life that you need to live. You can't keep sacrificing everything for me," I said weakly one afternoon, deliberately looking out the window to avoid her eyes, knowing that if I looked at her, I might break down completely. She shook her head firmly, moving closer and taking my hand. "Don't say that, Winston. Don't ever say that. If Elise were still here, she wouldn't want to see you alone like this, suffering without support. I'm her sister. I have to help you. We're family, and family doesn't abandon each other." Words touched my heart deeply, reminding me so powerfully of Elise that it hurt. My wife had always cared for everyone around her with such genuine warmth, especially her younger sister. I remembered countless evenings when Elise would talk about Tiffany with such love and concern. "She's strong and independent, but sometimes I worry she's lonely, that she doesn't let people get close enough. Winston, if anything ever happens to me, promise you'll look after her for me, okay? She needs family, even if she doesn't always show it." Now Tiffany was doing exactly what Elise would have done, sacrificing her own comfort and well-being to care for someone she loved. I nodded, tears rolling down my cheeks, unable to find adequate words. Thank you, Tiffany. I truly don't know how I will ever repay you for everything you've done. In stark, painful contrast to Tiffany's constant warmth and support was the absolute silence from my own parents. They never visited the hospital, not once. Never called to check on my condition or ask if I needed anything. Never even sent a proper message of condolence or support. The silence was deafening, more hurtful than active cruelty would have been. Every single day, I stared at my phone, hoping desperately that it would ring and I would see Mom or Dad on the screen. Morning, noon, and night, I waited for some sign that they cared, that I mattered to them at all. Nothing came. Only the beeping of hospital machines and the footsteps of nurses in the corridor outside my room. Their coldness cut like a knife with a blade made of ice, making me feel utterly abandoned by the people who should have loved me most. I felt as if I were truly alone in the world, facing both my overwhelming grief and my broken body, with no support from the people who had raised me. At night, when the hospital grew quiet and the lights dimmed, I lay awake for hours, wondering, torturing myself with questions that had no satisfying answers. What did I do wrong to make them hate me this much? Have I always been nothing but a disappointment and burden to them, even as a child? Did they ever actually love me, or was I always just an obligation they resented? Tiffany noticed my pain, seeing through my attempts to hide it. One late evening, as she lingered by my bedside rather than going home to her own apartment, she asked gently, "What are you thinking about, Winston? You have that look on your face." I told her everything, pouring out my fears and confusion about my parents, about feeling unloved and cast aside. She listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging, just being present. When I finished, she said gently, squeezing my hand, "They have their own issues and problems, Winston. Maybe they don't know how to handle this situation, how to face tragedy. But you're not alone, not anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Her words were a faint ray of light in my overwhelming darkness. It was Tiffany's unwavering presence during my absolute darkest days that kept me from falling apart completely, from giving up entirely on life. She didn't just care for my physical body, helping me with the basics of survival. She worked to heal my spirit, little by little, with every story she told to distract me, every smile she offered even when she was exhausted, every gentle touch that reminded me I was still human, still worthy of care. For the first time since the accident, I began to feel that perhaps the world hadn't entirely turned its back on me, that perhaps there was still some goodness left, some reason to keep fighting. Yet deep inside, the pain still lurked, waiting in the shadows for moments of weakness to strike. The grief over Elise and Mia, the abandonment by my parents, the loss of my career and identity, the prison of my paralyzed body, all of it waited to overwhelm me whenever my guard dropped. I couldn't help but wonder, staring at the ceiling during those long, sleepless nights, why is life filled with such cruel surprises? Why do some people suffer so much, while others seem to glide through life untouched by tragedy? I had no answers, only questions that echoed endlessly in the darkness. The final days in the hospital dragged on under a thick, oppressive anxiety, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon, heavy with the promise of lightning. Every morning followed the same routine. Nurses checked my vital signs with practiced efficiency. Doctors stopped by with their professional smiles and vague reassurances. Physical therapists pushed me through painful exercises. But underneath the routine, I knew a reckoning was coming. And then it arrived. One rainy afternoon, as drizzle pattered gently but insistently against the window, creating rivulets that ran down the glass like tears, the doctor walked into my room holding a clipboard. His voice was calm and measured, the tone of someone delivering news he had delivered many times before. "Winston, your condition has stabilized as much as we can expect at this stage. We've confirmed you're medically fit for discharge. You can go home tomorrow morning." The words exploded inside my head like a delayed bomb. Discharge. Home. The concepts that should have brought relief instead filled me with terror. Home to where exactly? I looked down at my paralyzed legs lying motionless under the white hospital blanket, and a dread heavier than the constant ache in my spine crushed down on me with overwhelming force. I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't manage on my own. Not yet, possibly not ever. Eating required coordination I didn't always have. Bathing was completely impossible without help. Even moving from the bed to a wheelchair and back required assistance. The simple act of going to the bathroom required equipment and support. The hospital had been safe, a cocoon where I was surrounded by nurses and doctors and machines that monitored every function. Out there, in the wide, unforgiving world, a broken man like me would be swallowed whole, crushed under the weight of basic survival. My heart pounded with increasing intensity. Cold sweat broke out across my forehead despite the cool temperature of the room. "Go home," the doctor had said. But how was I supposed to live? What kind of life could I possibly have like this? I whispered to myself, panic rising like floodwater. Go home. But how am I supposed to survive? Tiffany came that afternoon, as usual, carrying a bag of snacks and a cheerful smile that faded the moment she read my expression. "What's wrong? What did the doctor say?" "I'm being discharged tomorrow morning," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts to control it. "But Tiffany, I don't know what to do. With these legs, I can't take care of myself. I can barely move from the bed without help. How am I supposed to live alone?" She sat down on the edge of the bed and took my hand in both of hers, her grip warm and reassuring. "Come stay with me, Winston. I have a spare room that's just sitting empty. I'll help you with whatever you need. You won't be alone." Her offer was warm and sincere, and I could see in her eyes that she genuinely wanted to help. But I shook my head, having thought about this possibility during many sleepless nights, staring at those spiderweb cracks in the ceiling. After countless hours of agonizing deliberation, I had concluded that I had no choice but to consider one last resort, asking my own parents for help. I didn't want to impose on Tiffany any more than I already had. She had already done far too much, sacrificed too many hours and too much emotional energy caring for me. She had her own life to live, her own future to build. And beyond that, I was terrified of the rumors that would inevitably spread, the knowing looks and whispered comments. That paralyzed man living with his young, attractive sister-in-law? How convenient. I wonder what's really going on there. People would talk. They always did. And I refused to let Tiffany suffer socially because of me. Refused to let malicious gossip taint her reputation or make her life difficult. "No, Tiffany, thank you, truly, but no. I'll go to my parents' house instead," I said, trying to sound confident, even as doubt gnawed at me. "They're blood family. They'll let me stay for a while, at least while I recover and figure out my next steps. It's the logical choice." I said it to convince myself as much as to convince her, trying to believe my own words, even though they felt hollow. Tiffany looked at me with obvious worry, her brow furrowed. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Winston? They never even visited you here, not once in all these weeks. They didn't come to the funeral. Are you certain they'll help you now?" I nodded, but my heart felt like it was made of lead, heavy and cold in my chest. Deep down, I shared her doubts. But what other option did I have? I couldn't stay in the hospital forever, draining my non-existent resources. I couldn't impose on Tiffany indefinitely. My parents were the only option left. The next morning, discharge day arrived with painful inevitability. The hospital air felt suffocating as I prepared to leave, each breath seeming harder than the last. The nurse helped me dress in regular clothes that hung loose on my body after weeks of hospital food and immobility. Then she expertly lowered me into a wheelchair, a process that felt both strange and deeply humiliating, like I was a helpless child again, rather than a grown man of 34. The sensation of sitting in that wheelchair, knowing it might be my primary mode of transportation for the rest of my life, made me want to scream. Tiffany gathered my few belongings methodically, some clothes, bottles of medication with their long lists of side effects and warnings, And most precious of all, the old leather notebook Elise had once given me for my birthday years ago, filled with project notes and sketches, and her handwriting in the margins where she had added little love notes. She wheeled me down the hospital corridor, one hand on my shoulder in silent support, her voice gentle when she spoke. "Here we go. Are you ready for this?" I nodded, but my heart was racing, pounding so hard I could feel my pulse in my throat. Ready? I wasn't ready for anything, but time didn't care whether I was ready or not. The drive to my parents' house on the outskirts of Austin felt endless, every mile stretching into eternity. Rain dotted the windshield intermittently, bringing back horrifying flashes of that accident night. The truck's blinding headlights, the screaming, the impact, the blood. I gripped the armrests of my seat with white-knuckled intensity, trying desperately to push away memories of twisted metal and broken glass and my daughter's lifeless body. Tiffany drove carefully, glancing over at me every few minutes with concern. "Tired? Close your eyes for a bit if you need to. Try to rest." But I couldn't rest. I stared out the window with mounting dread, my nerves jangling like alarm bells. I told myself repeatedly, trying to build confidence through repetition. They're my parents. They'll at least let me stay for a few months while I try to rehabilitate. They have plenty of room. They'll understand that I need their help. Blood is thicker than water, right? But even as I repeated these reassurances, fear whispered insidiously in the back of my mind. What if they refuse? What if they literally turn you away at the door? What then? When we finally arrived, my childhood home appeared before us like something from a magazine spread. It was an enormous house, practically a mansion, with meticulously manicured gardens that probably required a team of landscapers, a 4-car garage holding 2 luxury vehicles I could see, and a polished stone entrance with columns that screamed wealth and status. I had grown up in this house, spent my childhood within these walls, and yet it had never once felt like a true home. It had always been just a cold residence, a showpiece, filled with formal dinners where children were expected to be seen and not heard, conversations that revolved entirely around money and business deals and social climbing, art on the walls that was purchased for investment rather than beauty. There had been no warmth here, no love, just expectations and disappointment. Tiffany parked the car and helped me into the wheelchair, her movements gentle but efficient. My pulse thundered in my ears like drums. Sweat soaked my shirt despite the cool weather. We approached the door, and I reached out with a shaking hand to ring the bell. My father, Camden Cole, opened the door within moments. He stood tall and imposing in an expensive suit, despite being at home, every silver hair perfectly in place, his face a mask of controlled neutrality. When his eyes fell on his son sitting in a wheelchair, there was no shock, no concern, no emotion whatsoever, just a curt, businesslike nod as if I were a business associate arriving for a meeting. "Come in," he said flatly, stepping aside. My mother, Marilyn, appeared from the living room, dressed in designer clothes with perfect makeup, every detail carefully arranged. Her eyes swept over me in the wheelchair, but there was no warmth in that gaze, no maternal concern. She looked at me the way one might look at an unexpected and unwelcome package delivered to the wrong address. "Why the sudden visit?" she asked, with distinct coldness, not even a hint of motherly affection. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "I was discharged from the hospital today. I need to talk to you both about something important." We moved into the living room, Tiffany wheeling me across expensive marble floors that clicked and echoed. The room was filled with costly leather furniture, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than most people's cars, fresh flowers and crystal vases. Everything designed to impress, nothing designed for comfort or warmth. It felt less like a home and more like a coldly professional office or hotel lobby. Tiffany positioned my wheelchair carefully and stood behind me, her presence solid and reassuring. I could feel the tension radiating from her body. I took a deep breath, gathering what little courage I had left, and laid everything bare before them. My voice shook despite my best efforts to sound calm and reasonable. "Mom, Dad, I've lost everything. Elise and Mia are gone forever. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors say I'll probably never walk normally again. I lost my job because I couldn't work from a hospital bed. I have almost no money left after medical bills and funeral expenses. I can't work right now in this condition. I need a place to stay while I recover and try to rebuild some kind of life. Just a few months, maybe 6 at most. I'll do my absolute best to improve and not be a burden. Please. I looked at them, desperately searching their faces for even a flicker of compassion, some sign of parental love or concern. There was nothing.